All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. Welcome. In case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org. Our profiles are anyway. And please remember the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And let us have comments and chat on the Zoom chat to make this as interactive as we can. And as always, if you want anything on this slide deck, it is available on mondaylive.org. So this being June, sorry, not July yet. We're talking about OEM disruption, so continuing on that. And our agenda today, normal chit chat, and then we want to talk about the impact of the intersection between proprietary issues and innovation, how those two sort of play with each other in the pursuit of open and interoperable building. So looking forward to that conversation. But before that, as always, going to hand it over to Mr. Sinclair for some news from automatedbuildings.com.
Thank you very much. Lots going on as usual. Let's go up to the top left-hand corner there. Beyond BMS, illuminating PropTech's dark data. And the dark data article actually talks about where we're heading today, I think, is we've got all these new innovative systems coming, and they come with proprietary data that we can't get at. And we're even starting to see some proprietary formats that we haven't even seen before. So I think this is a good time to be talking about what we're going to be talking about today. The next one is our summary of last week's Monday Live, which was great. We had a great discussion, and thank Kenny from university to come out and give us some real examples of what Keith's doing, and that was great. And I think the discussion went a lot of directions, but it showed a whole new side of AI and actually what folks are really doing with it, which was really good. So if you have a chance, click on that. The other thing that's pleased is I pulled in a couple of the discussions that broke out on LinkedIn, which I think that's basically what's happening in all of our discussions is they start with a post, but they spill over onto LinkedIn and even other social media formats. And so I'm trying to pull all of that back, but it just sort of shows the power of the way things are being discussed these days. The one below that is lawn work isn't ending, it's evolving. Tracy's just telling us exactly where the Lawn Mark International organization is going now. The chip is disappearing, and but what was in the chip is turning into open software. So a lot of interesting things going on there. Read what he's telling you. The one below that is wireless without worries. I was amazed at the interest in that. And one thing dawned on me is we haven't been talking too much about wireless on automated buildings or Monday Live. And there's definitely an interest in that. It's hard to beat from an installation point of view, and it's definitely getting solider. And the other thing is it's now combines better with our traditional systems because of open standards. And that's I think that's a big, powerful piece. Is some places you want to use wireless, other places you don't. Going over into about the middle there, it says owners are pulling work in-house. This is an interesting trend of AI. AI is so powerful, people say, why do I really need all these contractors? Can AI do this? And of course, what's making the magic of AI is always the person who's asking the questions and is driving the AI. And so it's an encouraging article that from name just escapes me. But anyway, they what they're talking about is how how that's all going to come together and how you have to be careful. And you have to, basically they're finding that our services are falling apart because we don't have people dedicated to providing them their services. And I think that's a real strong message. Over on the other one there, AI is a continuous commissioning. That's another concept. When you think about it, that very doable. That was posted by our contributing editor Thomas. So good on that. Another one, our first Japanese article that Kimon provided us, and he's talking about digital transformation, and that gets converted to DX, digital X, but the whole article is in English and in Japanese, and didn't realize that Kimon had spent so much of his life in Japan, so has a real good thought of the culture. Below that, well, up above, the smart buildings, we're a media sponsor of the smart buildings. That's going on there. I think they've just about sold out, so that's starting to close out. And if you're interested in going to that, you should be following it as well. Down at the bottom one is I just did a little bit of what happening in 90 days on some of our LinkedIn posts. And we're getting out now, we get about 88, last 90 days, we've had like 88,000 discoveries, they call it, basically posts or interactions. But then it's reached out and it's touched 15,000 people. So you can see that the social media is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of our magazine and getting our information out. And in addition to that, we have, 4 or 5, 6 different social media platforms that we're skirting around. So I think that's definitely part of the value. And then up there, I've actually provided a link to my LinkedIn thing where we've got 22,000. Oh, because it's 23,000 now, folks that are coming at us. That's important too. And if you can just see what we're posting, because I'm on social media all the time. So a lot of what I'm doing is if I see something that I think is of interest to the Monday Live crowd and to the Automated Buildings followers, I just post it. And it is reposting, but by the same token, I'm trying to kind of condense because there's so much stuff out there. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. As always, a lot of things going on. The link board is, as always. So open it up for any other thoughts or news from anyone.
Just quick one from me. I got a good report last week. I think it was a McKinsey report. It was titled "Seizing the Agentic AI Advantage," right? About how to take advantage of AI, agentic AI. But one of the things that it points out is a thing that they're calling the Gen AI paradox, which I thought was very insightful. And basically, the paradox goes like, a lot of companies, and to Ken's point, a lot of companies and corporations, small, big, large, are all plowing as much as possible into AI and machine learning and trying to convert their processes and procedures and all that sort of stuff. One of the things that's jumping out to many boards in these companies is, okay, we've put all this time and money and effort into ML. We don't see an impact to the P&L statement yet. What's going on? And it's kind of interesting. And they do a very deep dive into what's the cause of the paradox as far as, and we've spent, according to the report, we have spent, where is it? Between 11 and 18 trillion dollars globally on in implementing AI machine learning as all over the corporations. Yet the impact to P&L and bottom lines are apparently still missing. Anyway, so it was interesting. And one of their outcomes is that people are not focused on using AI for workflows that matter, right? That actually make an impact on your P&L, your bottom line, as opposed to just sticking ML and AI onto everything that moves. within an organization. So anyway, it's advocating for a, stop and pause and rethink your strategies. Interesting report.
Stop and maybe rethink ontologies. Sorry.
Oh,
Didn't
no,
resist that.
no, still dead.
I'd like
Interesting.
to make a comment. I'm glad that we actually this was a pleasant surprise. This topic that we're on with this open source, non-proprietary. I actually had a kind of an unfortunate conversation with someone in the industry last week, and I think I'd really like to get the definition of what does it mean to be not proprietary and open source or open, because I think a lot of people are incorrectly think that that means open equals free. Nobody's going to give their intellectual property away. So I mean that just goes without saying. So I mean it was someone got offended because I asked them to sign a mutual non-disclosure before I showed them our stuff. Like that's customary business stuff, dude. Like nobody's going to give you on the guise of being open and open source, show you proprietary stuff without having you sign an NDA. Like this is, at the end of the day, this is a business, right? So I'd really like it if we could kind of form a thesis, to start to say that, open and non-proprietary open source does not equal free.
Well, that's, as you said, that's part of the subject that we're talking about today. So
Yep.
maybe we can work towards that. And good point. Any other thoughts? All right, so OEM disruption, and the topic of the day is proprietary and open. Proprietary innovation. It's really a focus on innovation, and really the question is innovation. We all know innovation is good, but is proprietary innovation or innovation done in a proprietary way a good thing or a bad thing? Right. So it's really sort of the balance between the two. And I had some fun with AI over the weekend, and it obviously identified very clearly that the meme for innovation is a light bulb, and the meme for a proprietary is a lock. So well done, AI. So we have this sort of dilemma, right? So I think we all know that this is bad, right? When you have some innovation that is basically locked in some proprietary box, whatever that box is, a product or a service, where you can't even think about what's in it until you use it. I mean, from an open thesis perspective, this is bad, right? But obviously, from a commercial perspective, this is the best way. To roll, because you have a monopoly on whatever is in the box, right? So that's the dilemma that we all obviously sort of understand. And this is the other side of it, right? When there's open innovation and the box is open, so lots of people can interact with it. That's kind of ideal, right? But as I think Keith pointed out earlier, the problem with this is nobody makes money. Therefore, it's not an industry, and therefore it's not sustainable, right? So there has to be some sort of mix between the two. And so I sort of push AI, and it sort of finally came up with this, which I'm not sure is that great, but anyway. The idea that if you have some proprietary thing, right, that is innovative, that is cool, that actually adds significant amount of value, right? That's not a bad thing at all, right, for you, because you can market it or you can sell it, whatever, right? But I think the way that the way we need to think about framing it is make sure that it is delivered or encased or sort of done in a way so that it is not proprietary in terms of its consumption. And I'm not even sure I've got the right words there, but this is kind of, to me, is kind of the thesis of what really we're trying to shoot for if we want to motivate innovation and also motivate open at the same time. So open it up to the floor.
I guess, and so I'd like to just say something going back quite some time in the industry when there wasn't, let's argue just about communications for a moment and just say there wasn't a communication standard. So everybody had to develop their own, did what they thought best, and actually some of those were pretty good. They were fast, and then we kind of moved into trying to develop a standard for the industry, which took about 2 decades. But I think the intent when those proprietary communications were actually developed wasn't to lock people in. I think it was because there wasn't any standard to work from. But what happened was, and why it got a bad name, was then companies realized that using that communication and protecting it meant they could lock the customers in. And that's where it got a bad name, as opposed to people who did. And certainly I worked for a company where we had communications, we were quite happy for people to share it, but it wasn't really in their interest because they couldn't talk to the other 10 companies that had communications as well. So that's why ultimately, communications like BACnet and things like that developed. Doesn't necessarily mean it was the best. It just, became a standard that everybody finally got behind. And really, I think meant that perhaps people couldn't hide behind that proprietary comms to actually lock in the customer. And so it did, the proprietary originally got a bad name because of, the kind of misuse by some people in the industry, not because it was proprietary. It just wasn't, nobody was big enough to actually say, hey, just use this and it becomes a de facto standard, like using the name Hoover or something like that. It's moved on. And I think that, as Keith has said, when you start coming down to equipment and OEM and you spend millions perhaps developing stuff to control a chiller or whatever else, should that be open, or should you just give people access to the information it kind of can offer? And that, where does that balance sort of meet what the industry requires?
Interesting thesis, but basically you're sort of saying is that proprietariness was not intentional, but it was almost an accident, and then sort of reshaped the business model of the industry.
Yeah, as I say, because some people saw it and kind of abused it really in some sense to lock the customer in. I don't believe that was the original intent. There just wasn't a standard to work to, and everybody had to get on with, being able to communicate with things. And then it took the industry, as Jim will tell you, a long time, a couple of decades to actually get behind, at least some sort of standard for everybody to use.
What do you think, Jim? We can't hear
No
you.
sound.
You need to plug it in. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Good. Sorry. So a platform is sort of the line of demarcation for where people can build applications that bring value, and they have to have proprietary value, as we all know, in order to make money. So there's nothing wrong with proprietary value. The question is how do you devise an egalitarian system where everyone can play? And one of the problems is that developing the platform is not free, right? So you have people in the platform business, and the question that comes along next is how do they get paid?
And the drug industry has been trying to deal with this for years, right? Because things, drugs wouldn't actually be developed if the company wasn't going to make a fortune, but they probably spent billions in getting that product. And then just to say, okay, everybody can have access to it, it means that, you wouldn't know, people wouldn't have to do the development. They could just go on and copy whatever the company makes. So it's a real challenge, not just our industry, but for a lot of industries.
I was wondering if you were meaning the legal drug trade or the...
No, the legal drug trade, yeah.
I did wonder about that.
The other one's more open than that, yeah.
They have a much more interesting business model, right? First one's always free.
And yet you have the industrial automation SCADA space that has been using a proprietary de facto standard called Modbus for 40 plus years. I mean, that they just kind of seem to just moved on. they never got into the ontology wars and all that stuff. You know, Modicon, Modbus, that was invented by Schneider. And then they turned it over to a Modbus to modbus.org. It became a standard. Everybody used it. It's a de facto standard. Like everybody knows when you're talking to meters and SCADA PLCs, what protocol are you going to use? Modbus or maybe OPC.
But Keith, I would argue that in the industrial automation world, the manufacturers weren't in the project business. They sold products. So they were keen to actually.
They installed. I worked for an industrial automation vendor in Southern California. They put in industrial PLCs to control central plants. It was exactly the same.
Okay.
Exactly the same thing. They wonderware, all that stuff. They had to be interoperable because you didn't have the tight coupling of the front end HMI, as they called it, or PMI to the PLC. If you didn't have a Modbus MMI or human machine interface, you were out of luck. Your system didn't get, because they were true systems integrators and they brought together different pieces and parts. So no, it's the exact same business model. It's project based, just like our commercial and in commercial space, retail space. It's just that they don't have the luxury of coming out with a proprietary protocol because you won't get implemented.
So control automation companies since, I guess, the 80s or 90s have always offered supervisory systems, right, to sit on
Same
top
as
of
us. I mean, we're same thing.
But is
Yeah.
the supervisory system the place where proprietary became a thing? In other words, once you have a supervisor of a building, right, then that supervisory system is the building, right?
Yeah,
So in
side.
some way, everything has to fit in with that.
Yeah, the top enterprise side was Modbus TCP, and the field level device 485 was Modbus RTU, and that was it. So yeah, the answer is yes.
And in buildings, we saw that obviously supervisory systems are all over the place, Metasys and others.
Yep.
Over the years, was that the vehicle that sort of allowed this industry to become so proprietary? Was that the sort of the product or the
I think so. Yeah, I mean, and then you just had the proliferation of the Tritium platform, and I mean, Andrew Rogers posted a couple interesting posts on LinkedIn. Like everybody, it's like this open secret that everybody knows, but nobody talks about, that the Fox protocol for Tritium, for the Jace platform, is proprietary. And we all know that. Everybody knows it, but nobody talks about it. Why? Where's the backnet over IP driver for Tritium? I'm just asking.
I think another thing in the old days is there weren't so many standard options. And then so folks were forced to proprietary protocols because they couldn't do what they wanted to do. And I think that's all evolved a lot more now. So I think if you're starting up with a new product, rather than inventing your own protocols, I believe there's a greater tendency to try and pick one of the ones and go with it. So the other thing that we used back in the early days of DDC is we had a mandatory requirement, and we had things that they had to do. And every time the project moved ahead and the industry moved ahead, we would then add another mandatory requirement. And I think we have to start moving back towards that, to come up with a mandatory requirement of what it is we're looking for interoperability, and basically leave it up to them to offer that. They may cobble several standards together to give us the result. We're just looking for a result, and I don't think even forcing them to use Linux is probably not a complete solution. It's probably a part of their solution, and something they would
You
want.
just have a proprietary Linux box, instead of
Yeah,
I
good
don't.
point.
I think that that there is a difference between industrial and buildings in the following sense: that you know, and then maybe the stuff Keith was dealing with, like large central plants and chillers.
Yeah, data
there's-
centers and stuff
there's
like
a
that.
there's
Yeah.
a crossover there. But if in the manufacturing businesses I worked in, the procurement model was completely different because the PLCs and the industrial controls actually came in with the equipment we bought, not the building.
Right.
So there was a shorter time constant, and I can tell you none of it was low bid. It was all a question of which equipment was bought, and then the controls that came along were the equipment that came with those systems. Whereas buildings, we have our, you know, ridiculous procurement methodology where we continue to, you know, low bid building automation. which-
Value engineer. Yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, value engineering those professional services away. And that didn't happen as much in manufacturing because those machines were deemed, you know, critical to the
But they're
process.
mission critical. Yeah, you
Yeah,
couldn't value
exactly.
engineer. Yeah.
So as an example, General Motors standardized on Rockwell, you know, Allen Bradley PLCs.
Yep.
I can tell you they did not low bid PLCs every time they put up a factory.
They were
Whereas-
SIG 500s, man, and then that's just, you know.
Exactly.
But it wasn't so much that I mean, they are mission critical per se, but more importantly, they are a direct function of the output of the product, right? When
Yes.
your production line is making the bottles of ketchup, right? Your revenue is tied to the bottles of ketchup, and your production line better run, and your PLC's better run. So there's a direct correlation between the value of the PLC to the number of ketchup bottles that you're pushing out at the other end.
Absolutely.
In our world, it gets a bit warm and a bit hot, tenants unhappy. Yeah, okay, is there a real value?
Yeah. That was what was so fascinating about it, because it seems like, I'm not sure, but Anno, I mean, we talk about this all the time. Like, I was amazed when I first met with Anno down in Australia in 1993. And they were hanging lifts, elevator control off of Ethernet, fire alarm systems, certainly SCADA systems, Scan 3000, that was industrial automation. I mean, you guys, you started that stuff. Like, I was amazed, and I was fortunately able to take that back to the States. And I mean, that was the forerunner to the EVI, but it all started, but way back then in the 90s, we were doing this stuff, and that was all industrial automation stuff, SCADA systems. So yeah, I was fortunate to be able to have a lot of critical experience in both C and I customers. So retail, commercial, and industrial SCADA automation. Like, Bank of America data center was like my first project. I was a team lead on it. And yeah, to Jim's point, you're not going to value engineer that, because when their central plant went down, you're going to lose $1 million a minute. Okay. So it's not even on the table. This is N+2 redundancy. So yeah, I was fortunate to be able to grow up in that industry. And I saw how proprietary systems could also be a standard and work beautifully together.
Right. So, turning this around, obviously there are differences between industrial and the way there was an open industrial industry. The ISA, the Instrument Society of America, used to have a ginormous show, and that trifurcated into 3 ecosystems, one for Siemens, one for Rockwell, and one for Emerson. Yeah. Those companies rolled up everything. And if your equipment ended up having mostly Rockwell, you became a Rockwell house and specified all other Rockwell stuff. That's very different from, a university campus or a roll-up of office buildings where they had everybody in there and you got what you got and you had to maintain it, and it wasn't considered as mission critical. So, these business decisions weren't made. But, the song remains the same, that whether it's industrial or open, this development of ontologies and development of open standards, whether it's things like OPC that have richer data definitions than Modbus, BACnet, etc. These things are establishing that platform that we're talking about. And I think the argument is how high or how low do you go in that platform? Modbus is an example where you stay very low and there's very little value added to the data. And in fact, it actually isn't that useful to modern applications because you got to do a whole lot of work to make it work. You can make it work, but you got to do a lot of work.
Yeah, it's register mapping. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
to this day.
To this day, yeah, it's all open, but you got to do a lot of work. So what we've been striving for, and I think that, you know, the Linux Foundation work and all the work that's been done through C4SB and Monday Live, we're striving to build that platform up so that at an open level, and the ontology work as well, and even AI, you know, so that we can we have a level platform that different people can play on. But once you've established that, then it's all about competing, you know, with applications to show who has the most value or who can be more innovative, right?
Yep.
Is that really the strategy here? That let's talk about that. Basically create because it's all about platform, basically move towards having a platform that is inherently interoperable and open, and
Right.
then motivate people to be there. Is that really the way to think about that?
I think it is.
That's your mandatory requirements of that platform. That's what we need to start developing is what is it that we actually are trying to do here? What is our object?
It's interesting though. It goes back to Jim's point at the beginning, right? About, and I've just seen the struggle in a lot of the clients that we're talking to who want this sort of thing, right? Who clearly are folks we talk to clearly. So like, you know, I'm trying to get the open platform so that, and they've all tried different things, right? They've tried all the standard Tridiums and Myconixes and everybody else's, but they're all looking for that platform. But one of the frustrations I hear from them is it doesn't exist, right? I can't, where do I go, right? And
It can't, it's a continuum though, right? It's never going to completely exist. It's a journey rather than a destination.
Right. Yeah, but I think no, I agree with you, but back to your earlier point, right? Someone has to invest in it and make that happen, right? It's not, it doesn't self-evolve, right, out of pieces.
But you know, you've looked at a spectrum of 30 or 40 years of that open investment through groups like ASHRAE and other standards making groups, Lawnmark, you know, that are way stations along that journey. Now, you know, what if you ask yourself, okay, what's the difference between this and the Apple iStore? It's scale and timing and adoption. And one of the things that we're constantly hobbled by in this industry is the extremely slow adoption of our technology, which doesn't allow us to borrow the money or take the risks to make those investments, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's true that Apple locked the whole thing up, and there's a lot of litigation and antitrust around the world on that story. So people aren't happy with the destination that it ended up with. But we don't enjoy that kind of fast-moving IT market where we can make those investments and get those returns.
Yeah, and I think that's always that fallacy that everyone falls into when you start to compare against Apple, right? To your point, they move at such speed and there's such volume and there's such demand, you know, that they could do whatever needs to be done.
$10 billion cash in the bank too. So geez.
It's an interesting comparison though, because I mean, if you just took the interoperable part that Anto was talking about, you know, you've got a Samsung phone, it can communicate with an Apple phone, and you know you can share the data. It's how much and what, you know, what level do you need to go to actually for it not to be proprietary? As we were saying earlier, that if you spend billions on developing, you know, something for a chiller or whatever it is, you know, so that it operates the most efficient way, providing you actually make the data available that everybody needs, is that enough? But not all the algorithms you're doing to tune the chiller to make it right and do, you know, that's where all the money was spent. Making the data available isn't a big deal. I think everybody does that now. And it's what is acceptable to be proprietary to protect your business interest as opposed to what part of it should be open. I mean, originally, Anto, you said interoperability, which is fine. Is that deep enough?
Right. What say you, Mr. Justice, from an open source perspective?
Well, several different conversations going on. That's so interesting. But the so somehow demonstrating the value of that data being used at a higher level is I don't know. I guess we feel like that's what's lacking, is that people are we haven't really been a software defined industry. We're not really a software industry, right? So you can create your little proprietary application that runs on your proprietary platform and satisfy the need, but software at a higher level is there's yet to be that killer app that demonstrates the need for that platform that Jim was talking about, that or or killer apps, that kind of demonstrate the need for that interoperability. And but I believe, and the Linux Foundation believes, that as industries evolve to be more software defined, that's what brings the visibility for the need for that interoperability of the data, the need for the platform, or the need for that evolving platform. That takes shape as more people want to write creative software. And that's, I think that's one of the things we're still searching for. But like what Jim talked about, it, that what we did with the Tiger team of trying to create some sort of commonality between these different systems, demonstrate the usefulness of it. I think that's a step in the right direction of starting to show what the gaps are relative to that interoperability. But on the proprietary side, people are going to always want to have something that they can make money based on, and this default to like, oh, I'm going to create something proprietary. I never thought that an engineer went off to solve a problem and said, you know what, I'm going to do it in a proprietary way. I never thought that that's how they were doing it. I thought they were always trying to solve it in the most logical way that they could with the tools that they had, and do something innovative, probably. And then it's those evil product managers and salespeople that say, "Now let's do it in a proprietary way so we can lock in our customers." That's if the engineers had a way to be able to solve the problem with 100% non-proprietary, off-the-shelf components, I think they would. But that's again what I think Ano said. The problem is the platform doesn't exist to be able to do that. So you got to invent all these different pieces, and then somebody says, "Hey, let's lock it down."
Yeah, I do want to extend on Albert's comment in the chat there about AI, right? In that, back to some of my earlier comments, the challenge with AI is we've truly gone back to your box and light bulb analogy, Anto. It's the box that's closed with the light bulb on top. Nobody knows what's inside the AI box. Even the data science guys can't tell you how it's working. It's actually gone even more to the dark side. Sorry. In that, you can't even describe the algorithms now. Your models are the thing that's of value now, right? So the models that Keith's created is the value that he's created, because that's where the real value becomes. But if I was to ask Keith, could he look inside his models and describe how they work? Keith's a smart guy. He could probably go a long way, but then could he explain it to somebody else, right? In a way. So it's a challenge, right? I think AI starts to drive us back the other way. But take it back to the discussion. Does that really matter if the platform is open and he's got access to all the open data in Modbus or BACnet or whatever the protocols are, and what he's creating is the value of in his models and the output that he generates? That's where his value is, right? I'm speaking for Keith, but I imagine you don't care how you get that data in the first place.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, we have an open platform that just kind of comes with our product. So it's a plug and play architecture. We have a RESTful web API. You can write from your own. You could build your own gateway, publish to our cloud. Publish to our cloud. You can bolt on. We have even commandability now through most of our gateways. So if you don't like our AI, go ahead and write your own AI, write your own model. It's a platform to support that. So yeah. So why does anyone have problems like signing an NDA again?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
Is
You
it
got
fundamental?
everything you wanted, right? So I mean, you can read write to your heart's content, even from your own system. and it's open. It's interoperability.
Isn't it fundamentally about the fact that we are not a software industry? Is that sort of the root cause of a lot of this?
Well, yeah, and that starts with the pricing. It's like, well, how much do you charge for that, Keith? And it's like, well, it's half a penny per month per square foot. Like it's affordable, but yeah, no, I'm not going to pay for it. Nobody's going to pay for that. Well, okay, kind of like how do I make my business profitable? Like I got investors and shareholders just like everybody else. Like I'm not just going to give this thing away.
But the software issue is a little chicken and egg issue, and that if the platform doesn't exist, I can't write innovative software. And if there's not demand for software, why would I create the interoperable platform? To Jim's point, if we're not going to have enough volume of software vendors that are doing software, doesn't matter what it's priced, whether it's free or whether it's open source or whether it's proprietary. If there's not going to be enough innovation on the software front, then why do I need to have this common platform? And then flip it around. If I don't have the common platform, I don't have the ability to write. And that's what happened with the iPhone. If we all, and he got away with it, and it drives a lot of us nuts. He got away with that, creating a platform that everybody's like, wait a minute, I'm only going to be able to charge 99 cents for my application now. Well, how's that going to work? But the ecosystem evolved because people were like, well, damn, I can actually make a pretty decent business off of 99 cents.
Well, it didn't evolve. It was prescribed by Apple. Like,
well,
it was vertically integrated, right? So, I mean, you had no choice.
Well, no, you did have a choice. You could decide not to write your app for that platform.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by he got away with it. Is like, or they got away with it. I think I was working there at the time. But there was a huge risk as to whether the developers were going to move their apps to this new platform. But the chicken and egg is the part that I was talking about. It's like, and that's what we're trying to do with, saying, hey, here's some models of some portions of the platform and evidence of the platform being within reach. And now let's go see what happens for the innovative software folks, is to say, are they gonna respond and say, hey, look, here's a way we can do software. So
I would argue that one more point. I would argue that software developers and engineers are so fickle and shallow. They're going to follow the next shiny object. Apple's perfect example. What is the programming language that all of them are enamored with right now? Swift. That's Apple's programming language. You talk to any developers, like I even mine, like, Keith, we need to go on Swift. It's so neat. I'm like, we're not going to go on Swift, dude. It's not, no. But look at it. Here's Apple. So mission accomplished, right? They've got a vertically integrated proprietary platform, and the software engineers love the Swift programming language. They're fickle.
To go back to Rick's point in a minute and combine your thoughts there, Keith. But when Apple did that thing, right, Rick, and you said, well, then they came over. Well, in reality, you said, will the developers convert their apps to Apple? Well, to be honest, it wasn't there wasn't the existing incumbents one, right? Look how long it took Microsoft to convert their applications to Apple. It took them years. It wasn't until
we're not going to do it.
We're not going to do it. It wasn't until all those new guys came along and said, "Hey, here's a Word app, or here's a text app." Or once they started eating into their things, then they went, "Oh yeah, okay, you got to drag me kicking and screaming, right? I'm into it."
Yeah. We have a slightly different situation here, though, and because of our slow movement and the fact that in order to do applications, I might point out something interesting, which is Keith is in business today.
Yeah.
As am I, as are you, Anna, right? We're in business because we already have solutions to getting this data. Now, are they easy solutions? Are they open solutions? Well, a lot of them are open in a lot of ways, but are they easy? And what's missing? What's missing is that only people that have a lot of expertise in the industry can get that data now. So that has been a differentiator for companies like ours, right? We know how to get data. We know what to do. we've had endless conversations in this forum about how once we get above the HVAC or the harder core building automation features, we can't get the data, which would unlock other applications. But in what we're doing in creating this platform is we're also blowing away the lock that we currently enjoy, right? We're opening it up to let those little guys and other innovators into a space that we control, not because we're evil, but because we've developed expertise in the rough neighborhood that we live in.
Yeah.
Right.
It's called killing your cash cow.
Yeah. So the answer is that there are disincentives, and I think that in a lot of big companies, that's codified as policy. Whereas all of us who've participated in standards industries over time realize that the idea that the pie is actually bigger. We're growing the pie by making it open, and that everybody wins. That's our thesis, anyways, and that's why we can continue to contribute. But I mean, that's part of the tension in open versus closed, right? What's open and what's closed? Who are you opening it for, right? And have they been net contributors, or are we basically just opening our flanks up to people who haven't paid their dues? All on a spectrum, right?
I like that. Open our flank up.
So, Rick, with regard to the Linux Foundation, when they look, now that they've had a chance to really look under the covers as to what we're doing, and they recognize we have open protocols like BACnet, and there's still a lot of LAN out there and so on. What are they suggesting as the path to get to a more interoperable platform? Based on all their experience working with all these other industries, what are they telling us as an industry we need to go do, or their suggested path to making the systems more interoperable, knowing that our starting point are a couple open protocols?
So the Linux Foundation is really not in the business of observing and making recommendations, and they really don't do that. They give the industry a place to operate in an open community, open source based way. We as the participants have to look around at the other examples in other industries and make conclusions or make observations. But the Linux Foundation itself does not have people who come in and look at the industry and say, here's what we think needs to happen. So they kind of leave that to us as the community to observe, and then again, the structure for how problems get solved is really all about the convening of people that are interested. Now, they do make suggestions. There are a couple of key people, and we've had access to a couple of key people who say, hey, there's this really interesting thing happening over here in this group, really interesting thing happening in this other group. But it's less about the technology solutions than it is about the, get everybody together, which we tried to help facilitate with the Tiger team, pretty decent success, small steps, but the way to evolve things, according to the Linux Foundation, and we're seeing this work, is to try and motivate people to come and have conversations and to participate. And that's for better or for worse. What has happened with the Tiger team, which was really interesting, was that by the fact that it was the Linux Foundation and NIST that was co-hosting the Tiger team, we got some of absolutely the right people all on these calls to talk about and to listen to each other talk, to listen to each other describe what they were trying to do. And it was quite revealing to hear what was happening in all these different areas of standards and semantics and ontologies. Sorry, I know. But it was really interesting to hear all those experts come together they came together because they knew that whatever was going to happen would be happening in this community-based um, Linux way sort of approach. It would be great if there was a master AI agent that we could throw all these things at. It was the Linux AI, but it
Well,
doesn't exist.
did the Tiger team, in simple terms, did the Tiger team posit the idea of a open source REST, I'll call it a REST API, that everybody can start to use, and whether their data is available in the cloud or it's available on-prem, we're all going to agree to support this particular REST API, and here's how you code it up in your system. Did that kind of discussion occur?
So the conclusion was not to take it all the way up to an API, or maybe it's a different level, but that systems should be demonstrated using RDF, resource description framework. So if you can make your system, whatever it is, make your data from your system available in an RDF knowledge graph format, now the system can be demonstrated how a query can work across this system and this system and this system. Now that was as much as that group could all agree on would be useful, but it is pretty useful for the sorts of data that's coming from building automation systems and other systems that are relevant to buildings, other digital systems in buildings. To agree that expose your data, build your system to be probably not,
RDF compliant.
yeah. And then that in doing that, then that allows for innovation. Okay, it's like we got consensus. Do we have consensus? Yes. We're going to make that be the common denominator. Now let's go build demonstrations of the value of making systems compatible with that. So I think it was a really important demonstration of bringing all the right people together and of having some level of consensus of how systems could work together at a basic level.
So does that convert as an owner that I can say my mandatory requirement is that all my data must be RDI?
RDF.
RDF.
Yeah. Yes. And I would say that 99.9% of vendors that were participating we're cool. We're cool. I should say that 99.9% of the time, all of the vendors and all the people that were participating were happy with that being the recommendation to an owner, to an engineer, to an architect, to a designer, or whatever. It's like, okay, so this is what you should insist on. Did I get most of that right?
Okay, but the point is if we work as Anto pointed out, we're not software developers. We basically want an end result. And if we try to fashion our desire into mandatory requirements, I think you've just given me one mandatory requirement,
Right,
and there are
yeah.
probably others to further clarify that. And it seems to me as a group, if we all kind of worked on that and kind of came up with, it's probably just a short paragraph that an owner can put into his documents to try, and a consultant to try and solve some of the problems we're trying to solve. Is it as simple as that?
It's an example of something that is simple, yes. And then there will be other examples that we're going to spin off of the Tiger team that'll be for other domains of data and other domains of systems for them to articulate how they relate to this proclamation or this declaration of this being a good thing.
Will this find its way to 2525?
Yes.
Good.
Absolutely.
So that's the evil plot, right? We created 2525 a couple of years ago with the thought that perhaps someday the industry would come to some sort of common understanding of what to put in 2525.
You're making progress.
Slowly.
Well, that's encouraging, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But As
But-
usual, you're not telling anybody what it is you're doing, so can we?
I told you, we're going to keep this stuff a secret. It's,
Secret society.
we pay for admission to our meet. No, we don't. Of course we don't.
Secret
Um,
open source.
No, all our meetings are proprietary.
Yes, 25 bucks a head.
It's
But the-
SOS code, secret open source, right?
But but I think I think we are more excited about the fact that what we demonstrated by bringing the right people together to get consensus, or at least mostly get consensus. It took a lot of 2 steps forward and 3 steps back and 2 steps forward and 1 step back to get some progress made. But I think the demonstration of bringing people together, because everybody had the right intent. Everybody was in agreement that owners really would like to have the industry get its story straight and to have more choices and interoperability.
Well, I think now is the time, and what we're talking about here is we're talking about the software and the intelligence is becoming part of the hardware. And so we've got a whole bunch of people that are coming into the industry or who are like us, are not software people, but have to make decisions. So I think what we need is, I hate to suggest it, but almost an interim definition of this, which I keep calling the mandatory requirements of what it is we're doing, so that they can just simply understand that we've moved to this level and that they can use some of those words when they're communicating with their software developers. And there's probably a bunch of other words, as I mentioned, that are needed. And I think maybe that's the documents that we should be working with, and maybe Linux can help us on that. But I think they're all looking for help, and from what I see is from where we were 20, 30 years ago, we have a lot more options. And nobody wants to write software they don't have to write. So if they can actually go to a GitHub and get a big piece of this, they're going to do it. So you just tell me which pieces of GitHub I can use that you approve, or yeah.
Yeah, we're so this past Friday, what is this? This is Monday, so it's only a few hours old in terms of getting consensus from the Tiger team on documenting and moving code bits to GitHub for the C4SB GitHub repositories for these demonstrations. So it's all brand new. We still don't have like a document that summarizes what's been done. I think on this call in the last 10 minutes, we've done more of a summary than what is actually
Summation of that.
totally been done. So it's not hot off the presses because the presses weren't running over the weekend.
But I think the importance of us getting that information out timely is obvious from this meeting. Is people are scratching their heads trying to decide how should I proceed, and it looks to me that you've got a good portion of that, and just verbalizing that or getting it into some kind of a format that is just a paragraph that's going to go in a specification that kind of points them to what kind of resources are available, I think is useful, even though the resources aren't done. If I'm developing something now, then I know you guys are working on that and I see pieces of it on GitHub. It would encourage me to go that direction and hope that you guys get developed what I need before I get there. And that's the way the whole software industry works. It's very dynamic.
The other side of that, Ken, is that it would also be good for people to participate in all of this work, because it's so, that has to be a call the other direction for the industry to do this, because it's only done by people who do work.
And again, I think the other point that we talked about before the meeting, let's just call him the educated owner. And I think Keith keeps finding these people, and partly he educates them, but in addition to that, he seems to have a stable full of them that these people know exactly what's happening. They're looking for a result. He says, I can get you that result. He works with them. They become partners. It's not just a client, it's not trying to sell them something. They're part of what it is he's trying to sell them. And that whole thing comes alive. And all through my life of being in this industry, I had access to those people that basically they took on our mission, and they were asking me to do stuff, and they understood the risk, and they would give us sandboxes to basically go and try this, see if it works. If we'd give them an idea and they say, did that work? We don't really know. We think it will. And
Yeah.
they say, do you want to try it? Here's a building. Take the floor of this building and do that and see if
Yeah.
it can work.
We're
And
at the early,
that's just a completely different way of working.
yeah, it is. And we're at the early adopter stage, right? So yeah, don't have time for skeptics or laggards. Like those are I'm looking for the 10% that's going to move the needle for us.
That's right. And you
We'll
don't
get
want
to
to
the
deal
90
with
later.
don't want to deal with those other people. They just take your time.
No, right.
You want people who want your time and amplify your time.
And
That's
appreciate
who
it.
you want to work
And
with.
appreciate the value. Yes.
Yeah, so we've got to change the whole dynamic that way.
Yeah, that's spot on, Ken.
Okay, I think this is a good time to wrap. I think so. We have another mission, which is to slowly turn this industry to be kind of a software industry from where it is now, which is more like software as an afterthought rather than software as a service.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith, for that quote. Yeah, we don't want software as an afterthought. Okay, so thank you for the great conversation. This has been good, and we'll get a video out next couple of days. I hope everybody has a good week. It's getting warm here in the US, so enjoy the summer.
Don't talk to me about warm.
You're in Phoenix or
Outright hot. We've already had 117, so
Oh,
my
wonderful.
God.
Yeah.
You can keep it.
yeah. Yeah, I'm bugging out